right, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming out to the National Museum of Industrial History. We have Gordon Baker here, who I think he said WFMZ called him quite a character. So we're excited to have him here. Also want to talk about some of the other things that are going on today. After this presentation, if you go into the gallery, we'll be running a 115-ton steam engine. So that's quite the sight to see. If you want to come back tomorrow, we also have a smelting demonstration going on. We'll be doing hot riveting in the morning, forging demonstration, and we have a really cool presentation called Duffy's Cut, which is about a railroad down towards Philadelphia. There were Irish immigrants that came over to build the railroad and to tie in with the Celtic Fest theme. And they actually found out later on that all of the immigrants that were working on the railroad were murdered. And so they'll talk about the kind of archaeology behind how they discovered that and the industrial history of the railroad. Thanks all for coming out, and turn it over to Gordon.
All right, good. I'm not going to murder anybody.
I hope not.
Yeah, okay.
It's on video.
Let me introduce several people and get this started. First of all, if you're in here for a lecture, you're in for trouble, because this is not going to be a lecture. I don't lecture. We're going to rap back and forth. We're going to have a good time. At least 5 of you are going to be up here helping, and you're going to help Erica, who's my grandson's doing some video, and this is his wife. So this is Erica Baker. You got Bakers all over the place today. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to have a good time. And to prove that, I need you up here, and I need one volunteer who can walk better than I can, because I'm going to sit down, and she's going to do all the work. And I'm just going to talk. So I need one person to come up here that can walk a straight line. It's an illustration of a point. And we're not going to finish until about 5 o'clock, and if you don't cooperate. There you go, he's coming, I got one coming. All I want you to do, or all she wants you to do, is walk the length of that board without stepping off the side. Can you do that? Can you walk a straight? Yeah, you got the idea. He's pretty good, but you're not done yet. See, this is the board. Now, listen to me carefully, because I don't want to get sued. If I ask you to walk that now, what's your reaction?
It's a lot more dangerous.
A little bit, you're not so sure. Oh, you're going to blame it on the chair. You're not going to blame it on the board. Okay. Well.
And you have to trust the strength of the board, right?
It'll hold you.
Yeah.
It'll hold you. But we're not going to let you do it. Okay, so you're done. Okay. But there is a point to this. The point is simply this. That could be a beam, that could be a board. I have to admit that I've walked a 12-inch board 350 feet in the air, but I only did it once, and I never told my wife, but that's beside the point. But in any event, people that build bridges and buildings walk things like this all the time. And if we didn't have them, you wouldn't have bridges and buildings, and they're called iron workers. So here, as I said, I'm going to sit down. Here is a picture of iron workers on beams about 300 feet in the air on a building that everybody in this room has seen. So what building do you think that was from? It's Martin Tower. That was a Martin Tower picture. And they're up pretty high at this point. Martin Tower was about 320 some odd feet high, and they're pretty close to the top. So people do this all the time. It's a little bit strange, and so on and so forth. Now, everything I'm going to show you today, I worked on, except this bridge. So my next question is, what is this bridge? That's the Golden Gate. Here's the question. Where was the Golden Gate Bridge born? Where was it fabricated? Where was it manufactured? I heard some here in Bethlehem. You're in the right state, you're in the wrong city. Somebody said Pittsburgh, you're in the right state, but you're in the wrong city. It was in Pottstown, 35 miles from here. Pottstown was a big fab shop. It was our biggest fab shop. And you're going to hear a lot about Pottstown today, and you're going to hear a lot about Leetsdale, which is Pittsburgh. I worked a lot in both places. And literally everything I'm going to show you today was born in Pennsylvania. And unfortunately, I only know one significant fabricator that's still left in the state, and that's, I'll do a little commercial, that's High Steel in Lancaster, doggone good outfit. But there's some small ones, but I don't know of any big fabricators anymore. But we used to build just about anything and everything right here in the state of Pennsylvania, and unfortunately, that's not happening. So, all right, let me give you a little background on of me, quite frankly. I graduated from Lehigh in 1956, and I wanted to build bridges and buildings. And I got hired by Bethlehem, and guess what? Shortly after I got hired, they handed me a pencil, and they said, go to Pottstown. What am I going to do with a pencil? Over 100 people are draftsmen at Pottstown, and they're drawing pictures of everything that's going to be on a building or a bridge, because the shop needs a picture. And the draftsmen are down there working, and I'm going to be one of them. For 6 months, I draw pictures. And it's my turn then to go in the Army. I report to Fort Belvoir, and I'm in the Corps of Engineers. I go through Officer Basic, and I teach then bridge building in the Army Engineering School for 2 years, and I loved it. But I could get out of the service, come back, I go back to Bethlehem Steel. They said, oh, welcome back, here's your pencil, go back to Pottstown. I said, you gotta be kidding. I've been out of school for 3 years, this is more pictures. They said, yep, you're gonna learn this from the bottom up. So I go to Pottstown. For 6 more months, I draw pictures, but then the fun starts. They said, all right, now pack up your family. I'm married by this time, and I have my first son, who's the father of that guy right there. And we moved to New York. And I'm gonna be a young field engineer. I'm about 26 years old now. I'm gonna be a young field engineer on the Throgs Neck Bridge. Now, question again, you're gonna rap with me all day. How many people have been on the Throgs Neck Bridge in New York? All right, it has not fallen down, so we did a good job. We're gonna build the towers. And Bethlehem Steel does a lot of tower building, and I'll show you why. And this bridge, each tower is about 350 feet high. That's more than a football field. It's 6 football fields, 1,800 feet from one tower to another. It's not a huge suspension bridge, but it's a good size one. But let's have some fun. Let's find out how to build a suspension bridge. And now I need 2 men and 2 ladies to come up here and work with Erica, and we're gonna build a suspension bridge. And you're gonna learn the 4 things that better work for a suspension bridge to function properly. So, come on now, 2 ladies, 2 men, you're not gonna be making speeches. So, all right, got half the group, got the men, need 1 more lady. And if we don't get a lady, I'll take a man, but come on, ladies. All I want you to do is hold the end of a rope. Come on now, you can do that. All right, we've got 2 ladies. Now the reason I wanted 2 men, they're gonna be towers and we're gonna put ropes on their head, and I didn't wanna mess up the lady's head. So, all right. Now, Eric is gonna give Judy, who I know, the end of the rope, and George is gonna face the audience. And she's going to put the rope over George's head. And if he wants to hold it there for just a second with his hand, he can, but we'll get you to let loose here in a minute. So now, Erica, we're going to tell George to let loose and pull down on that rope. And I want to, 2 things, pull hard. Come on. 2 things should be happening. George, do you feel anything? Judy, do you feel anything? All right. Up here on the screen, it looks like we have a rope, but that's really a cable. It's a huge cable. It's a couple feet in diameter. It's made up of about 2,000 wires that are about the size of pencils. And it's not going to break. It's really strong, but we're going to use a rope. And as she pulls on the rope, 2 things are happening. Out in the distance, there is an anchorage, and an anchorage is a big concrete and steel thing. And its whole job is to hold on to that rope. I'm sorry, Judy, but you're a big concrete and steel thing. George is the tower, and I have to ask George a question. Are all your bones connected, George? All right, because when Erica pulls on the rope, whatever pushes on George's head goes down through his neck, down through his body, out his legs, and down into the floor. And that's all he does, is stand there. Now, don't laugh at him. You're going to be the other tower, and you're going to face the audience, and she's going to put the rope on your head, and you're going to hold the rope over here. And we should begin to look like a suspension bridge. Now, she has one more thing to do. You need the roadway. And the roadway's over on the table. And we're going to pull the rope down a little bit in the middle, and she's going to hook. There she goes. That's fine. That's perfect. On the suspension bridge, the roadway is strong enough to carry all the buses, cars, and whatever goes on that bridge. Now, the Anchorage people, hold tight. George, you can put your hand up there for a little bit. And whatever, the roadway literally is hooked onto the cable. So now what do we have? We have a cable that's strong enough and it's not going to break. We have two towers that are arrogantly standing there saying, see how much you can push on my head, and they're not going to fall over. We got anchorages that are not going to let go, and we have a roadway that's strong enough to hold anything we put on it. So when you go across a suspension bridge the next time, these are the four things you better hope work right, and they do. I don't know of any failures really in this country since about 80 years ago, and that was the famous one out in Tacoma. But we build bridges differently nowadays, and they work. Now, one more thing. Get her to let go. She just ruined the whole bridge. She did what I asked her to do. We're done. That's a suspension bridge, and we're going to see how we're going to build one now.
The failure, didn't high winds play a factor in that?
Yes, it did, but also the design did. I could tell you some horror stories about that because they had them on. I'll be honest with you. The Golden Gate Bridge had the same problem as the Comm Narrows Bridge, and until it was reinforced, it was in trouble. Yeah, but it's been reinforced.
That bridge's next door neighbor was a twin.
Which one?
Whitestone. It was supposed to be a twin to the Tacoma.
And it had to be reinforced also. And quite frankly, the George Washington Bridge was designed the same way, but it was big enough and heavy enough that it never showed any signs, but it was not stable until we put the lower deck on it in 1959, 1960 when I was over there. So we'll get to that. All right, let's go. We're gonna build the towers, and we're gonna say how we're gonna do that. So here is a picture of the tower that's already up to the roadway level. And I think you can see several things. First of all, it looks like there's been pieces put one on top of the other, and you're absolutely right, but these just aren't pieces. These are pieces that were made in Pottstown. They weigh 35, 40 tons, the size of a World War II Army tank. And so you have to pick them up with a crane. Now this crane is unique. That crane, as the tower gets higher, the crane crawls up the tower. And the mechanism for doing this has been used on a number of bridges by the time we get to here. And where do you think it was used for the first time? Come on now. Golden Gate Bridge. Actually, the mechanism for picking this thing up and everything was literally the pieces from the Golden Gate Bridge. You might say the crane was as well. It's been modified. It's probably been used 6 times by the time we get here to this bridge. But now, we're up at the roadway level, so let's take a look at the roadway level. Now, here's some interesting thing. Here's another couple iron workers. They're 160 feet above nothing, and they don't seem to be too upset. Everybody in this picture is an iron worker. Now, don't ask me why the guy's sitting on a bolt keg. I didn't ask you. But I want to talk about safety. Here's another question for you, the audience. What do you think the iron worker, who's a pretty savvy guy, hates in terms of weather? Wind. You got it. Can you imagine being those two guys and bam, you get hit by a gust of wind? Well, one day we were up just about this point, and lo and behold, it got gusty, and the iron workers are pretty smart. They went home. There are 8 of us left on the job. Three of us are engineers, the superintendent, the boatman, and the elevator operator, unfortunately. And the superintendent says to this dummy, before we go home, I want you to go up and check on something. So I do. I go up on the elevator, which is just out of this picture. I get to just about where that bolt keg is, and I get hit by a gust of wind. I got knocked off of my feet. I never stood up. I crawled back to the elevator, came down, said, that's it. Now, at that time, we were building a 50-some story building in Wall Street. We were putting the lower deck on the George Washington Bridge. How many people have been on the George Washington? See, just about everybody. That is the busiest bridge in the world. It's reported to be, and I'll take their word for it. And of course, our job, and we had a radio that we could talk to each other. And I no sooner got back in the construction shed, and the radio says, George Washington, man overboard. And a foreman was blown overboard just about the same time I got blown off my feet. He was killed. Now, we, Bethlehem Steel, did not lose anybody on this, putting up these towers. But while I was there, 2 people did get killed, and they were both back on land working for another contractor. One fellow got hit by a truck, and one fell in a hole. So construction work is dangerous. So here's a picture that's worth looking at for about 4 reasons. The skinny one's me. All right, so we got that out of the way. I'm the one on the right. This is your first picture of what's inside of a tower. It's built like a honeycomb. It's real rigid. It's got thousands of little rooms. Everyone has a ladder. Everyone has a door. You can climb, unfortunately I had to one day, from the bottom to the top of that tower inside on ladders. And it's also dark. So 2 of us in this picture, the 2 guys with the lights on their hard hats are basically rookies. The one in the middle is going to watch one tower, and I'm going to watch over the other tower. And Fred, he's been at this for about 8 years. He's going to worry about the 2 of us. So that's basically what's going on. He's the guy pointing. So I had asked George if his bones were connected. Every time we put one piece on top of another, we had to make sure it was touching. So one of my jobs in the tower I'm watching over is to crawl around inside that tower with a feeler gauges until we pulled it down, got it seated, and then we could bolt it up. So that's why we had the lights on our hard hats, because it was dark in there. Question for you, how do you get a railroad car out in the middle of the East River? So we'll find out. What you do is you have a car float. It's really a barge. It has railroad tracks on it. It holds 17 railroad cars. Now here's another question for you. How many people have ever been in a canoe? Come on. Now here's a real question. How many people ever turned over and got wet in a canoe? We got some honest people here. All right. Why? Because you probably leaned to one side too far. Another one of my jobs, I'd order 17 railroad cars over from the yard that's right near Ellis Island in New Jersey, but I just didn't tell them to bring me 17 railroad cars. I told them where to put it on the barge so we didn't unload one side of the barge, or we might get wet just like you did in a canoe. So that was another job. We take the piece off the railroad car, we bring it up onto a work platform, and then we do several things. This is a different piece. One of the things, you just don't pick up Army tanks willy-nilly. Every piece had a lifting plan. It had a particular hitch to put on that piece, a particular place with the right number of bolts, and it was another one of my jobs for the tower I'm watching over to see that that hitch was put on, the right hitch the right way, and so forth. Then the crane can pick it up. And here's what happens, you hope. First of all, it goes up straight. So you want the center of gravity, and it's going up straight, and you don't drop it. And we got them all up straight. We didn't drop them. But there's something new in here. There's an elevator. And this elevator is strung between 2 cables and a drive cable. And it's the greatest ride in New York City. You get in that thing, you go 350 feet in the air, you can see for miles, it's relaxing. We're getting paid to do it. But if you were in Dorney Park, you'd pay to ride this bugger, okay? But now, here's a question. The highest paid person on the job, that's an hourly person, it's 1959, is the crane operator. And the crane operator happens to also be running this elevator. What are you going to pay the crane operator on the Throgs Neck Bridge in 1959? Let's have an auction.
I'm gonna get $6.
I got a $6 auction. Anybody else have another one? 10. He'd like you. All right. What's that? 5, you're right on. The crane operator got 5. Phil was awful close. I was making about $3.75 an hour. I'm serious. I had bought a brand new Ford 2 years before for $1,650. I'm going to buy a 3-bedroom brand new house down outside of Pottstown for $13,700 2 years from now. So things have changed, folks. $5 an hour was good pay back in those days. So, all right. You're a good audience, and you're right on. This is a picture I just happened to run across in some of the things that I have at home. Excuse me. This is a saddle. It's a casting, and it sits on top of the tower. It looks like it's being put in the wrong place. I won't go into the engineering part of it, but the tower, 3 of us that were engineers had to get out at 5 o'clock in the morning to decide where to locate this thing. We had to check how plumb the tower was with surveying equipment. We had to get up there and lay this thing out. Why in the world do you think we got up at 5 o'clock in the morning and started to work?
The air is stiller.
What's that?
The air is less motion in the air.
Well, you're close, but not quite. Sun. If the sun's shining on one side of a steel tower, what does it do? It leans. We needed to know where it was in its best neutral position that we could find. So we had to get up before the sun did. So we've located that, and that's the top of George's head. It doesn't have a groove in George's head, but we have a groove in the top of these towers where the cable's going to go through. And that's what that's there for. This is a finished bridge. It's about 2 miles long. I understand I've gotten 2 pieces of information. A trucker just told me this past week. I asked him. I was told that it costs $7.50 each way and you pay each way. He said, no, it's $15 and you pay one way. But that's still, the guy that was the highest paid guy got $5 an hour. You're paying $15 to cross the bridge. So the bridge is about 2 miles long. It's still being used. The floor system's been replaced at least once, but it's still an active bridge. It's also the sister bridge to the Walt Whitman Bridge down in Philadelphia. Anybody been on that one? Okay, you've probably been to a ball game and you've been on Walt Whitman. So we got the towers up. They said to Gordon, move your family back to Bethlehem. You're probably going to be in the engineering department for a couple of years. Good luck. So I moved back here and we go to work. And I'm not back hardly any time at all. And the bid has to be worked on for the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge. Anybody been on the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge? Biggest bridge in the world for 20 years. And it's 1960, and they won cars on this bridge in 1964. In 1960, it's paper. 1964, cars are on this bridge. It now takes 5 years to widen 1.5 miles of 22 and do a nice bridge job, which fortunately is now open. But we're going to build the biggest bridge in the world in 4 years. It's such an aggressive schedule that we, Bethlehem Steel, say we can only bid 1 tower. So we do. And I think we probably rented the equipment for the other one to Harris Structural Steel so they didn't have to reinvent the stuff that we've used on these other jobs. But we're going to build the 1 tower. It's more than 650 feet high. This bridge is 60 feet longer, further apart than the Golden Gate. I can't imagine why they did that. But there it is. All right. Here's another picture of the tower we put up. And here's a great picture. showing that it does have twin cables, and this is quite a bridge. And now, we get the job, our erection engineers say, on paper again, here's the pieces we want to break this up into. We're going to have the draftsman down in Pottstown drawing all this stuff up. But Gordon, before they do that, guess what you're going to do? I sat down for 3 months, and I calculated the approximate weight of every piece that's going to get picked up in the tower. I had to calculate the center of gravities, and then start the design of those hitches that I said that we used on the Throg's Neck. We're going to do the same thing on the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge. I'm in the midst of doing that, and the big boss calls me in and says, you and Fred got along real well over in New York. You're going back over to the Verrazano, and you're going to be a field engineer putting that tower up too. So I go home that night, and I don't sleep. So I go in the next morning and said, I'm not going. So I risked the job, I guess. I had 2 reasons. Number one, Dave's father was started school in New York. I hope I don't hurt anybody's feelings, but I didn't think that was too cool. Number 2, had I gone back over as a field engineer on the biggest bridge in the world, I'd have had a tattoo right here, and I'd have been a field guy for the rest of my career. And I would have moved to Baltimore, Detroit, Philadelphia, wherever it was, and I didn't sign on for that. So I didn't do it. Stayed in Bethlehem for a while, and when they're starting to get serious about fabricating things in Pottstown, they said, go to Pottstown. But before we do that, I'm going to show you one more picture. Just got this picture about a year ago from a fellow that had been a photographer. Matter of fact, I've given this frame picture to the museum. This is the saddle on top of the Verrazano Bridge. It's so heavy, it's 176 tons. It's in 3 pieces. Had I gone back over on that job, I'll guarantee you I'd have been in that picture. I'd have made sure. But that's quite a picture, and there's some reasons for the rollers and things, but it's not going to roll off the top of the tower. It's anchored down. I go to Pottstown. They said, you may be there the rest of your life. You want to buy a house, go ahead. So I do. And I'm a shop engineer in the biggest shop that we have, and I'm going to learn the business down there. I'm going to be down there maybe 4 or 5 years. This is a newspaper picture of one of the pieces on the Verrazano-Narrows Bridge. After it's checked out here and it's been riveted and so on and so forth, it's got to be milled and painted, but 2 guys are checking it out before that, and the guy in the white t-shirts or sweatshirt's me. So I know that, but nobody else in the world does. Okay, go ahead. While we're doing that, here's a question. You'll show your age if you say yes to this. How many people were ever at the New York World's Fair? I was twice, both years it was open. We did 5 of the buildings for the World's Fair. We did them all in Pottstown. 2 of them I got pictures of. This is the telephone company building, and I smashed a finger working on that with a fitter, but it healed. And this is my favorite building of all times. And we'll have some fun. Does anybody recognize that building and what it was and so forth? It's General Electric Carousel Progress Building. You went in, you sat in an auditorium. There's nothing straight in this building. It's all round. Look at that roof. And it's all round. You sit in an auditorium, and the auditorium indexes to 7 different stages from starting with a light bulb to a modern 1964 kitchen. You can go in this building today, and it's not in New York. Anybody know where it is? It's in Disney down in Florida. I thought it was. It's in one of the Disney complexes. I've been in it twice down there as well. What they did, Disney said, man, I like that building. So he buys it, he sends it to California, to Disneyland. And then they build Disney World. And so he gets it, takes it to Disney World. It's been used, it's been mothballed, it's been renovated, it's been used, it's been mothballed and renovated. It reopened about 2 years ago, and I know 2 people that have been in it. in the past 2 years. So you still can go in this building. It was a challenge. It was a lot of fun to work on that. All right, we did not make little green men, but we did a lot of work on the biggest radio telescope that's been built until last year when the Chinese built a bigger one, Arecibo, Puerto Rico. Anybody been there? I know one person that meets with us for breakfast Wednesdays once a year, a couple of us in the room here who has. The mechanism that you see hanging from cables, even the cables were Bethlehem Steel, they were made up in Williamsport. But that thing in the center was done in Pottstown, and I worked a lot on that. Now, does anybody know who Carl Sagan was? All right, who's Carl Sagan? Astronomer? What university? Cornell. Yep, so got some knowledge here. And he was also an atheist. The two guys that ran this telescope for the first 10 years, and I kicked myself, I had 2 opportunities to go down there and didn't. I wish I had. Once it was built, 2 guys from Cornell ran this, and they were astronomers and they were atheists. I met these 2 men at a interdenominational church camp in upstate New York 10 years later, and they weren't atheists anymore. So you could take whatever you want from this little chit-chat. Somebody had said to them, what are you doing? They said, well, we're trying to figure out how all this stuff got up here and so on and so forth. And they turn around and they say, well, why don't you read the first 3 chapters of the Old Testament in the Bible that talk about some creation things? So they did. They said, well, it's general, but nothing that we can't deal with. They said, well, why don't you read the rest of the Bible? These 2 guys did end up becoming believers. So it was pretty interesting that where I ran across these 2 guys, and then they ran several seminars that I loved. But that's the story of this. Go ahead. I'm 34 years old. In the meantime, after a few years in Pottstown, they pulled a half a dozen of us back here to Bethlehem, and we did some neat stuff that impacted Martin Tower, and that's what I talked about right the week before Martin Tower was the computer work that we did. And now that's done. They said, Gordon, pack your bags and take your family. I now have 2 kids. My daughter's been born in the meantime. You're moving to Leetsdale, to Pittsburgh, and you're going to be the assistant works engineer, and you're going to run the drafting room that you used your pencil in Pottstown, only now you're going to be the boss. By this time, I have my engineering license, and this is a great job. Every job has to, again, have pictures made, but every job has problems. And it's my job to interface with the customer's engineer and solve the problem so that we, Bethlehem Steel, can build what it is we're going to build. So for 2 years, including Martin Tower, including getting the problem solved for the Comm Barry Bridge, which I'll show you a picture of here in a minute, down in Wilmington, and a big assembly plant for Chrysler, I start to lose my hair, and we're going to solve those problems, and I love the job. But they said, 2 years is enough, don't get too comfortable. You're going out, sorry, go back to that one. You're going out to the one plant over here on the right that does all the bridge, all the building work. You're going to work on Martin Tower, and you're going to work on some of the stuff for the assembly plant for Chrysler. And I'm there for 2 years, and they said, don't get too comfortable. Pack up your bags and move to the other side of the plant where it's the big bridge shop and welding shop, and you're going to be the superintendent. You're going to lose the rest of your hair. So I do that. Now you notice at the end of the building out there is a loading dock for barges. This is an amazing true story. I always got to work about 6:30 in the morning, and I always hit the shop floor right away, so I knew what was going on the shift that was going home, and we started up the day shift at 7. Well, I'm out there in the shop about 6:30, and all of a sudden, there's a terrible storm. Wind blows about 70 miles an hour. We have 2 big barges loaded with big cement kilns, sail area you wouldn't believe. It breaks loose. We have, let's see if I can point out some things. These are our barges there. The river flows this way. Pittsburgh is up here, and the barges are, the wind's blowing so hard it blows the barge out of this picture about a half a mile towards Pittsburgh, and they run into a bank. What are you going to do with 2 big barges? They run into a bank. If you got to them, you're not going to do anything anyway. The good news is that there's a tug company over here. So I call the tug company, and we do business with them. Matter of fact, they were supposed to come that very day and did work on these barges. And I said, I got a problem. They said, you sure do. They said, I'll get my men and we'll get on the tug and we'll go get your barges if they're still there, because it's going to take us 20 minutes to get the engines up to speed and running and so forth. You better pray the wind doesn't stop. Well, they hang up, and I guess I prayed pretty good, but the wind did stop. These barges, and this is a true story, no tug, the barges are coming down the river. There's a Ambridge Bridge 5 miles down the river. If it hits the wrong part of that rickety old bridge, that bridge coming down. If it gets beyond that, these things are going over a dam. I see my job going down the Ohio River, people getting killed. The barges get right here, the wind starts to blow, and it blows them right back to the loading dock. And 2 foremen and I tied them up, and that is the honest to God's truth. The phone rings. It's the tug company. How did you do that? And I said, you told me how to do it. You told me to pray. And to this day, it's the only answer I've got. That is a true story, folks. So things happen when you're working on stuff like this. Commodore Barry Bridge, Bethlehem Steel did that entire bridge. Some of it was done in Pottstown, some of it was done in Leedsdale. I worked a lot on this bridge. They tell you how some people are. The engineering firm in New York would only talk to me because I had a professional license, and the guy from Pottstown didn't. So every time Pottstown had a problem, I had to fly to New York to solve the problem with the engineer because he wouldn't talk to the other guy. So we got the bridge up. Here's a picture of some of the things we did out in Pittsburgh. And the way you know they go together is that you put everything together in the shop. Now this is a rainy day. It's so big we have to do it outside, and you put them together, you finish drilling holes and things. There is a man in that picture, but you have to find him. That's big, big stuff. So we got it all together, pull it apart, ship it, and so forth. Go ahead. Now let's move inside my shop. I'm now superintendent. The shop is 1,300 and some feet long, 3 crane bays wide. This is 1/6 of the shop. And we were busy at this point. We're putting several bridges together. The ones on the right are a railroad bridge down in Texas. And that was a neat job. But that's a picture of how you know it's going to go together. You don't want to mess around up in the air if you can help it. We did some blast furnace work, blast furnace down in Sparrows Point. A lot of it was done in Pottstown, a lot of it was done in my shop. So between the 2 of us, we got that built. This is blast furnace work for Lackawanna, a plant up in New York. It's much smaller than blast furnace. The guy in the dark mill jacket is yours truly, so I know that again, nobody else does. We built some pretty neat stuff. This is a railroad bridge for Michigan. It's about a ton a foot, and it's about 170 feet long. This is in the shop. And here it is. Here's an engineering problem. Ship that baby. You got to get it on 3 railroad cars. It's got to go around corners. It's got to stay on the cars. I had to design, and I did this myself, I had to design special bolsters because of the clearance, and the ones that we had weren't going to work. So we had to get those cleared by the railroad. We got it there and it didn't fall off. Now, here's a funny story, alligators. What do they have to do with bridges? Down in Wilmington, North Carolina, I don't know if anybody's ever been there or not, Cape Fear River. I know why they call it the Cape Fear River. There's a great bridge. I call it a great bridge because I love this thing. It's a bascule bridge. When it's up, the boats can go down the river. When it's down, trains go across the bridge. And we built this entire bridge, including some of the mechanism, in my shop. And it was a great job. We're proud of it. We shipped it, except we got a problem. I get a dreaded phone call. There's something wrong with that connection. Now it's down across the river while they're building it. So I fly down. I'm going to have to decide what to do. And I'm up in the air about 50 feet above the Cape Fear River. And I'm with an iron worker. The iron worker says something like this to me: "Hey, boss." And I said, "I'm not your boss." He says, "You are today. Now, I don't want you to fall, but I want you to look down." I never saw so many alligators in my life right underneath of us. I said, "Do you feed those buggers?" He said, "Yeah, we throw them stuff at lunchtime." I said, "They're not looking for sandwiches." He says, "I know." Well, that was a little bit unnerving. We got the job done. We got the dickens out of there. So. Now, but before we go on, you can leave that up there. Before we go on, I got a question. What was the Cape Fear River and Wilmington, North Carolina in the news for both last summer and this summer? Hurricanes, floods, water going down the main drag, water from the Cape Fear River in your basement. Where were these alligators? They still live there.
Oh, yeah.
I would not have wanted to be sloshing around in Wilmington. But that's, again, we did if you go down to, I'm drawing a blank. New Hope, yep. This is down at New Hope. This is the interstate bridge. Bethlehem did that entire bridge. Had a little bit of me in there, not a lot. Missiles for Minot, North Dakota. The Minutemen missiles, we did a lot of elevator shafts and elevators. And a lot of these have been mothballed or turned into something else, but there are still upgraded Minutemen missiles in Minot, North Dakota, and I've got a good source that guarantees me that's true. We did the elevators and the elevator mechanisms in Pottstown back in the 60s, but there's a lot of that too. We did the new Madison Square Gardens, which is not new anymore. I had to work on that. And we did Martin Tower. And you know the story of Martin Tower. And that's, go ahead, one more. This is the greatest picture of Martin Tower, and this came from the museum here. I love this picture. I used it when we gave the talk on Martin Tower not too long ago. And I asked Eric up here, who is a photographer, if this is a good photographer or a lucky photographer. Now, what did you say? They're both. Okay, they're good and lucky. I don't know how you get an airplane in there, but that is one neat picture of Martin Tower, just about up the top. And of course, it's not there anymore.
Gordon, will you go back one?
Go back one? Sure.
Just quick. Thank you.
Okay. I had an office in Martin Tower right before I retired, and my boss and I were laughing. They blew us up first. They blew that wing first. They blew right above us and right below us, and we came crumbling down. So we'd been in our office, would have been the first ones to know about it, but it's gone now. That's it. The story ends in 1976, and I won't get into a lot of detail unless you want me to. The union and the company have a falling out, and there's two sides to every story. What has happened is that we're running a fabricating business, and we in American Bridge are the only two fabricators in the country that are using the basic steel agreement. And I don't blame the hourly people. The company was making money. They wanted their share just like the baseball players wanted today. They got it, but they also had 13-week vacations every 5 years and things like this. And we're bidding jobs that we don't get. We were low bidders, by the way, on the World Trade Center, but there's a reason why we didn't build that building. We did not build the original World Trade Center. We got our piece of the biggest bridge in the world in New York. The Comm Barry Bridge is the biggest bridge of its kind in this country. We got that. We got the things that other people were, quite frankly, afraid to even try. And they were neat jobs. But how many neat jobs are there? When I'm running the shop, I either had neat jobs or no jobs. We were non-competitive doing an overpass on Route 22. We couldn't even get a small bridge, I call them small bridge, across the Lehigh River. We were non-competitive. Somebody like High Steel would eat our lunch. So the company said to the union, here's what the contract has got to be if we're going to be competitive. And the union said, we're not buying. They said, think about it for 30 days. You say, no, we're going to close. They said, no, you're not. They said, no. Everything that Bethlehem Steel did, building bridges and buildings, evaporated in 1976. Over 5,000 people lost their jobs. Over 1,300 in Leedsdale, about 1,700 in Pottstown. This is a little self-serving. They offered the plant manager and they offered me a job back here. I did spend the next 20 years working for the company, but the place went out of business. The whole division did. It's a shame because we knew what we were doing. We were good, but we're not there anymore from 76 on. So folks, that's the story. It's the story of my life, and it's the story of the bridges and buildings that we built the last 20 years. So I'm done, folks, unless you have questions. So that's it.